Don't know much about anything right now except Granny's down at the church doing her church singing practice, and I'm sitting here looking at a picture of my grandson with a telegram in my coat. All I know is one thing. It's dark evening. It's 29 September 1944. I don't know what's happening to my grandson 3,000 miles away behind that barbed wire fence and behind those stone walls of that Nevada State Prison in Carson City, where he'd been living for past 2 years inside a cell on death row. Sometimes I'm trying not to think about how maybe just a few minutes ago, prison warden come in and told him to take off his shoes and socks, and then the boy walked barefoot and down the cement corridor and past those 179 men prisoners he wrote me about, sitting there on their cots and staring at the bars and sitting there in silence and wondering where their own childhoods went. That's what I'm wondering. Where's your childhood went? Sitting here. I got me a telegram in my coat pocket from that nice Nevada State Prison warden. I ain't opened it yet. I don't know if it says my grandson's alive out there and going to be living in prison the rest of his life, or he's already done dead in that gas chamber. I figures, boy, if you are alive, you can't be hearing me, so I'm going to be saying what I got to be saying to your picture here. I took this picture out of the house. Granny don't know it. But if you's already done dead in that gas chamber, then I'm hoping the good Lord might have quick mercy on your soul, and that you goes come back here to say goodbye to your grandpappy. And yous can be hearing what I got to be saying before the good Lord sends you off to wherever it is you're supposed to be going.
His grandpa couldn't save him from the jailhouse. The warden sent a letter to his home. He felt helpless and hopeless in that prison yard. And why his mommy left this world he didn't know. Grandpa said, "Floyd, little boy, now you're on your own. Help yourself and do the best you can." Floyd said, "Why?" to himself, "I don't understand. I hope for time to prove myself a man."
Your granny, she wanted me to be opening the telegram right there and then, but I says to her, "Granny, our Floyd's been out there in that man's prison for 2 years now, and all I've been hearing for 2 years is you crying and you weeping and you sobbing and you groaning to Jesus, and I just ain't going to hear no more right now." So I told your granny, here's what she's got to do. I said, "Granny, you got to go to the bedroom and put on your church singing practicing dress like you always done every Friday night. And little Willie McFarland here is going to take you down to the church, and you're going to do your singing practicing, and I'm going to go to the work shed and take me a butter sandwich, and I was going to be doing some thinking and talking and eating, and if the good Lord got mercy on my mind, maybe I'll be doing all three at the same time." You know what I'm holding in my hand, boy? I'm holding a money box. You remember our money box? You should be remembering it. You and me used to put pennies and dimes and nickels in this here box. And one time a month, remember, on Saturday mornings, you and me, we'd be getting in that big truck and going over to the big city and buying ourselves big ice cream cones and walking around looking at them like we was thirsty dogs in the hot August sun. And I'd be telling you stories my grandpappy told me and his grandpappy told him about shoes and pumpkins and puppets and walnuts, and you'd be laughing, and I'd be happy to hear you laughing, because you never did much laughing after what your mama did, what she did to you. I got me $22 in this here money box, and it ain't been easy these past 2 years getting this money. None of the old ladies in this God-forsaken town ain't coming up here no more asking me to make or fix them shoes for their children or husbands. Ain't coming up here no more asking me to make puppets for their children or grandchildren for Christmas or birthdays. Ain't coming up here no more asking Granny and me to sell them walnuts or pumpkins for their Halloweening or Thanksgiving pies and cookies because of that war going on over there in Europe. ain't got no more money around here to keep their farms going or putting food in their children's bellies because of that war. But even if there weren't no war, nobody coming up here because of what you done. Every time those newspaper and radio people say those bad things about you, calling you the wickedest boy in America, people around this godforsaken place don't want to be talking to me and Granny. Only reason I got me $22 in here is because one day I was in your bedroom, the one you was always staying in when you wasn't so busy running away. And I found a book underneath your bed, and I knows you wasn't no book-reading boy, so I was surprised. But that gave me an idea. So I've been going around this godforsaken town collecting old books from people who don't read them no more. And I've been taking them down to the train depot. And when people get off the train to be stretching their legs, I sell them for pennies or nickels. And sometimes I goes over to the big city and peddling them on the streets outside the library. And sometimes I'm glad you ain't back here, seeing your papa, your grandpappy, turning himself into a beggar's man. But I gotta do what I gotta do to put food into your granny's belly. So I tell you what I'm going to do with this here $22. If this here telegram in my pocket tells me those secret board of pardon men says yous can keep on living in that prison until yous is old and going to die of natural causes and yous is 6 feet under, I figure by then maybe the good Lord will have mercy on your soul and you might actually get up to heaven and your granny will be waiting for you and she can be seeing you again. But I ain't going to be there in heaven, no way, because when I die and they put me 6 feet under, boy, I was going down and down and down there because there ain't enough time in this whole goddamn world for the good Lord to figure out how to start feeling mercy for someone like me because all of the hate and bitterness I got floating around in my heart. So I'd like to see you one more time before I die. I'm going to take me the $22 tomorrow morning and walk to that Mr. McFarland's table in the train station. And I'm going to buy me a 2-way ticket on the train to Carson City if you're still alive, like this telegram hopefully is going to be telling me. Ain't got enough money to buy Granny no ticket, but don't matter much anyway, because she just be sitting on that train weeping and crying and moaning and groaning to her Jesus, all the way from here to Indianapolis to Chicago to Salt Lake City to Reno, and then she can be doing all that back here for free, so why should I take her? But when I come, if I come, I'm going to bring you some of Granny's walnut cookies from our walnut field, like ones you like. And I'm going to bring a pumpkin pie made from our pumpkin field, just like you used to eat all the time. And I'm going to bring you a nice pair of shoes. I'm going to be making for you those nice pair of shoes because I figure you've been wearing those same old shoes for 2 years now. The same old ones you was wearing when you ran away from that bad boys reform school, probably. Or the prison warden making you wear shoes belonging to men because of you being the only boy in that man's prison and they ain't fitting you, especially because you was born with those no-good-for-nothing crooked toes and feet of yours. And I'm going to bring you a puppet. Now, I don't care what that warden says. A grandpappy puppet looking just like me. And because when you first went into that man's prison, I had Granny write a letter to that nice prison warden of yours telling him I wanted to be sending you a puppet because of how you always liked helping me make puppets for the children back here. But he wrote a letter telling us it probably won't be a good idea for you to be carrying a doll around in a man's prison. But if I come, and because if you's been allowed to keep on living, then I'm going to bring you a grandpappy puppet. And you can keep it underneath your bed in that prison and none of those men can see it. And when it's dark and all the lights are out and everyone is sleeping and you get homesick and you get sad for your grandpappy, and the farm and Granny, then you can take it out and put it up on your bed and smell the wood and feel the wood from these trees and knows it comes from the fields back here and that I carved it just for you. And then you can fall back to sleep knowing one thing. And you know what, boy? Here's the one thing you got to always be remembering, that no matter what bad things you done in this world, your grandpappy ain't ever turned a cold heart against you.
When two hearts come together, it's greater than the sum. And when two and more are gathered for the same, we call upon the courage from somewhere deep within. And we realize dreams for you and I. stand for integrity and stay the course with me. Can you believe in something far greater than yourself? Will you receive the magic of His love? There's a tidal wave of passion that yearns to be fulfilled. Now be still, feel the power of goodwill.
And if I get out there to Carson City, you knows I ain't no hugging man. Even the good Lord himself can't remember when was the last time I put my arms around your granny, and no use asking her. I'm going to be putting my arms around you because I figure nobody has given you a hugging in 2 years, and you never let granny give you a hugging ever since you was 3 years old, and your mama did what she did to you. But I'm going to come out there and hug you, and if you be pushing me away, I was going to smack your bum, boy, because you needs a hug. But if this ear telegram tells me yous is already in the gas chamber and done died, because the prison warden says they's got to execute yous before sunset. That's the law out there in Nevada. And it's already dark here, so it's getting dark out there. Sun comes down here at 7. Then if yous already dead and done, then tomorrow morning, I'm going to take these $22 and I was going to go down to the train station and I was going to tell Mr. McFarland to wire the prison warden and tell him I got the money waiting for him and to send your body back here so you can be buried next to your mama. The prison warden told me in his letter he would do that, but me and your granny wasn't supposed to tell anyone. We got to keep it family secret because he don't want nobody out there in Carson City getting all angry and throwing more cow dung at him for nothing. I just sit here in this dark woodshed looking at my butter sandwich, feeling this telegram in my coat pocket, and all I can think is of one thing, boy. You sure did mess up your life. This morning I was thinking about all those Wednesday nights when your granny would run down to the church after she took her shower. She'd be down there singing up a storm with that song you and me used to like so much. I've been sitting here listening to it. And remember I'd put it on that, listen to it, and they'd put it on that fancy air singing, and you and me, we'd be sitting out here in this shed, and I'd teach you. I'd be teaching you how to do what my poppy called, my grandpappy called, what his grandpappy called, the puppet maker's dance, puppet maker's dance. You remember that, boy? I always tried to teach you the puppet maker's dance going on to that church music. Oh, if your granny knew, she would have had a bird. Oh, you and me, we'd be sitting here. I'd be dancing the puppet maker's dance. You'd be pestering to me when I'm trying to make shoes or puppets, and I'd start thinking, when is this boy going to stop pestering me? And then you'd pester me to teach you the dancing as soon as you heard the music starting down there at that church. I'd give all my 10 fingers and 10 toes and never dance again, boy, if you could be right back here now pestering me some more. Yes, sir, I'd be showing you that when we shake our shoulders like this, it means we are shaking out the sadness inside us. And when we be putting our hand up in the air and twirling our fingers, it means we'd be celebrating the sky and the ground and the birds and all the beautiful things of life. And then we'd be stomping our feet on the ground over and over, and it means we'd be stomping out all the anger and fears and bitterness we got building up inside of us. And when we spin and spin and spin, it means we are celebrating the circle of life. My grandpappy, his grandpappy, we're always taught to believe, since we ain't afraid of being born, we shouldn't be afraid of living, and we shouldn't be afraid of dying.
The rain falls on Lake Almanor, renewing old ties between the stillness and the movement of this place. We all share time and space. In darkest night, round firelight, under starless empty skies, our story songs seem to ramble on. A new day dawns,
Life cycles on and on. Our story songs still continue on.
I remember the other day, boy, when I was in the big city, peddling the books. I saw this man I know, and I started talking to him, because he was one of the few people around here still talking to me. He was that chemistry teacher at that local high school you never went to. I used to make shoes for him and his wife and his daughters and that little son of his. He's told me he's not angry at me because of what you did out there in Nevada. But he told me he ain't got no money, even though he is a school chemistry teacher. So he can't give me any money to help fix his family's shoes. He was telling me maybe that he's feeling sad because so many boys ain't going to school no more because they're walking the streets trying to find jobs to help their farming daddies and grandpas, or they're running off to join the army. I always thought maybe you was going to be working on the farm with me till I got old and went 6 feet under. And Granny sometimes thought you might go off to the army like your daddy did, except they kicked that bastard out of the army for thinking he was suspected of murdering someone. You didn't know that, boy, huh? We never told you. Your daddy was a no good for nothing. Anyway, that chemistry teacher, he told me that he knows, because he is the school's chemistry teacher, that it costs the government a pretty penny or two to make the poisonous gas that prison is going to be using for you in that gas chamber. All kinds of chemicals go into one big jar, and then some man is going to turn a knob or two, and boom, turn on the valves, and all those stinking chemicals slowly blended into one big stinking chemical and fill in the gas chamber, and then it's going to go into your lungs, and, well, I just shouldn't be telling you that, huh? But I'm angry, boy. I'm angry. I brought me out here my butter sandwich, and I don't even have the desire to take a bite out of it. Because I'm mad. I got to be opening up this telegram from that prison warden, and I don't feel like eating no sandwich. You remember how on Wednesday nights, your granny would be in her shower, and she'd be singing up a storm like that old Miss Kate Smith singing on the radio, "God bless America." Your granny would be screeching her singing so loud, she'd be sounding like an elephant having a baby. Using me, we'd be laughing, and we'd be laughing. Well, last night... Okay, boy, I got to tell you something. I hope I don't make no fool of myself in your mind. Thursday night, I switched my shower nights to Thursdays instead of Tuesdays, and I was pretending in the shower last night. Oh, I wasn't pretending that I was singing on the radio. I was pretending I was out there in Carson City, standing there in front of all those 5 men on that secret board of pardons. And I was telling them things they don't know about you. Telling them things the newspapers out there and back here ain't telling people about you. How the newspaper's only writing about how you is evil, how you is the wickedest boy in America. I knows you ain't so smart, but I knows you ain't evil. But those board and pardon men, they don't know what they need to be knowing in order to say you don't got to go into that gas chamber. I was pretending I was standing up there and I was saying to them, my grandson done wrong. That's a fact, and he deserves to be punished. Ain't no mistake about that. He deserves to be punished, but he's still my little boy, and he don't deserve to be put in no gas chamber. You don't know, my grandson was born dirt poor. We live in a town got no more than 600 people in it back here. He was born with damaged feet, crooked feet. He couldn't walk like other kids. And his daddy got himself kicked out of the army for suspecting he was a murdering man. The boy's daddy and his mama got themselves no money. Me and Granny, we tried to help them best we could. But one morning, his mama, Hazel, her name was Hazel, she took Floyd for a walk. They were coming to my house to eat breakfast and right along the railroad tracks, and the train was coming, and she told Floyd, he was 3 years old, stand there and not move. And when the train got close enough, Hazel done threw herself up in front of it, flew up in the air like a bird shot to pieces with buckshot. Little Floyd watching his mama flying through the air. And after my grandson's mama done herself in, and his papa couldn't take care of him properly, and I was too poor to have him come live with us all the time, and he kept running away because sometimes he lived with me and Grandma, and sometimes he lived with his daddy and his daddy's new wife, and then his daddy's other new wife, and none of those new wives liked having Floyd around, and sometimes he went to live with some people, and well, he couldn't help it. He started breaking into people's houses and stealing clothes and pennies and food. He stole a watch. So the sheriff put him in that boys' reform school over in the big city, but my grandson ran away because of the beatings with that big wooden paddle they used on the boys until they was crying so hard they couldn't breathe like they were cows trapped in a snowstorm blizzard. They used to lock them up in the closets. What kind of people working in those schools helping those poor boys, huh? Monsters, that's who they were. They was monsters. Not the boys, the people working there. I didn't have enough money to feed him under my roof all the time. Didn't have enough patience to help him fix his behavior. I didn't have the smarts to help him get to the point of forgiving his mommy and his daddy. His grandma took him to every Sunday down over at the Methodist church, but he didn't like my daddy's and granddaddy's church. Said he never could feel the Holy Spirit rattle his little bones. He liked his granny's Methodist church only because he said they fixed delicious tasting pies and cookies in the Sunday school. He didn't care for the preaching, just the eating. Granny don't know that. She also don't know that I tore something out of the prison warden's letter up before she could read it. You see, the prison warden, he sent us this special letter saying that last week, my boy, he was changing to be a Roman Catholic boy, getting baptized by some priest out in Carson City. I don't mind, because I don't believe in none of that stuff. Said the boy ain't calling himself Floyd no more, calling himself Francis after some saint who talks to birds. Well, I don't think there's nothing strange about talking to birds, I suppose. I talk to puppets. But the boy's granny, well, she wouldn't be too happy about that because she said she was born a Methodist and she's going to die a Methodist, and I ain't never seen her talking to birds or puppets or shoes. You don't know this, you people, you men. My grandson liked to play baseball when he lived here with us. Always made me so happy after a hard day of work in the shoe shop in the pumpkin and walnut fields. And I'd go out and play baseball with my grandson to watch him playing, with sometimes all by himself because the other boys, they didn't want to play with him because he had crooked feet. But then he got himself that bad friend when he went to the boys' reform school. How come that boy ain't in no jail with men? That's one of the nice things that Nevada State Prison Warden been letting my grandson do instead of just making him sit in the cell on a bunk all day doing nothing. He was letting him go out to the courtyard and play baseball. The prison warden created the all-star prison baseball team for the men prisoners to play the soldiers coming back from the war. And the prison warden sent my wife and me a newspaper article written by a reporter who went to see a game. And he wrote in the newspaper that my grandson was so good at playing baseball, it's too bad he ain't going to California. It's too bad he's going to die in the gas chamber. And that nice Reno lady, Betty, Mrs. Betty White, she wrote us a letter all filled with shouting and hollering words, telling us that some people read that in the newspaper, and they've been shouting all over the streets that the boy shouldn't be playing baseball. He's a criminal. And some of the people out there in Carson City are very angry, shutting up and down. Why is that prison warden doing that? Why is that prison warden doing that? Well, let me tell you something, you men on that secret board of pardons. Sometimes when I can't sleep at night, I come sit out in my work shed. And no matter what I try to be thinking about, my mind always goes back to the same old thing over and over. I think that poor boy was born with a string of bad luck attached to the soles of his feet and the soul attached to his heart. Because nobody don't know the whole truth about him. I know things about that boy not too many other people know. You don't know this because I ain't been in those newspapers that I know of. The boy was born with crooked feet and that he had all kind of diseases like measles and mumps and that other thing, diphtheria stuff. I know he had crooked feet because I saw how crooked those toes were. They were the ugly crooked toes. Ugliest crooked toes you ever saw in this world on any little boy. And his fingers were all bent out of shape, too, because sometimes he had to help make ends meet. So we had some money. He had to go work in the cornfields up in the road instead of always going to school. Then he got crooked fingers to match his crooked feet. And the little boy had hair all over his body in places where hair ain't supposed to be growing for a little boy. And big red pimples all over his face. And that's why he didn't want to go to school, because all those other kids, they was always laughing at him and making fun of him. I was always telling him stories just about everything I could think of just to cheer him up. He liked to hear my stories. How come nobody in that goddamn reform school did storytelling to my grandson? How come they didn't tell him fairy tales and stories, like stories about shoes, like I used to do, stories about shoes, the red shoes, Peachy the famous shoemaker, Cinderella, the elves and the shoemaker, the shoemaker's apprentice, Little Goody Two-Shoes. Then that pretend friend of his, Dale. Oh, he was a real boy, huh? Oh, yeah, he was a real boy. But I say pretend friend because real friends don't do to my grandson what Dale did to him. They too escaped the reform school. It was Dale's idea. I know it wasn't my grandson's idea. It was Dale's idea. They stole cars and they drove to Nevada. Ended up in a small cowboy and farmer's town like you know, Elko. Not too many people living there. But they got there, and they were only there for 2 hours until that pretend friend stole a gun and started shooting birds. And my grandson don't like to see birds get shot up in the sky. You know why? Because it reminds him of his mother in front of that train. So he and Dale, they had a big fight. And that Dale Bill marched miles back into town and told the sheriff that my grandson had run away from reform school in Indiana and was on his way to California to become a baseball player and was out in the desert sitting in a used-up old red car with a gun. And that nice man, that real nice man, everybody in Elko town liked a real lot, said he would go find the boy and help him. And he didn't mean no harm to the boy. He wanted to help him. I know he wanted to help him. I believe that. That's what the prison warden, the governor, and my grandson's lawyers told us. But that man, he found my grandson sitting in a car all by himself in the desert. And the nice man asked him, "Did you steal this car, son?" And my grandson, he don't lie. That's one thing he never did. He never told fibs or lies. So he said, "Yes, sir." And the man, he was like, they tell me 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds, they say. And he opened the door and said, "I got to take you back, son." But maybe he meant like take my grandson back to the sheriff's place. But my grandson got scared. What the prison warden called panicking, and they started to fight because he thought he was taking him back to that reform school. And the nice man tried to pull the screaming boy out of the car, but my grandson tried to scare the man off just by waving the gun. Just by waving the gun. But the gun went off by accident, and the man got shot, and he was shouting he was going to die, and the boy was crying, and he pulled the man inside the car and started driving, and the man kept crying, "Take me to the hospital," and the boy kept screaming. He didn't know where the hospital was. He was trying to drive to the hospital, but he didn't know how to get there because he didn't know where he was. The man died, and the boy got arrested, like you know, and the sheriff said when he arrested the boy was crying like a baby. Then they put him on trial, and the judge didn't let the boy have any witnesses to speak up for him. The trial lasted 1.5 days, and the men on the jury talked in secret for only 15 minutes and then said guilty, and then the judge said, "You got to die." Then they put the boy in the prison with all the men, but the big judges in Nevada, Supreme Court judges they call them, said he could have a new trial because the jury didn't say guilty of what, so they had a new trial in the same small town, and this trial only went on for 1 day, not even 1.5 days. They cut off the half day. The jury said guilty by premeditated murder. It was the same goddamn judge, the same judge as the first trial for the boy, and then he said again, "You're going to die." And I looked that word up in the fancy dictionary, premeditated. It means to plan to do something. And the boy didn't plan to murder that nice man. He did wrong, but he didn't plan on doing wrong. He said at the trial that he wanted to get from Indiana to California to make a new life for himself. He wanted to be a barber and a baseball player and go to high school. But I know something else none of those people know about my grandson. He didn't want to spend his life behind bars. He'd rather die young. In his letters, he sometimes writes about what's the use of sitting in a cell doing nothing until he grows too old, doing something. A young Irish Catholic priest over there in Carson City, he wrote us a letter too. That priest that's helping you. I ain't showed it to Granny yet. He told us that the governor sent him to talk to you so you wouldn't be so afraid of dying. You told the priest that you knew you did wrong, but if you was given a second chance, you knew you could prove to the world there was still something good inside you. I know that's true. I know that's true. Because even though you did such a bad thing, inside of you is a good boy. Just maybe we don't see all the goodness in you when we should have looked for it. I guess I ain't got nothing else to be saying to you, boy. Suppose your granny's been sitting down there in the church waiting to come home to see what the telegram is telling us. But I got me one more thing to be saying. Because I'm angry. I'm angry at the people out there sitting in their living room staring at their radio sets. They ain't paying no attention to their boys and girls riding their bicycles up and down the streets. They ain't paying no attention to the dogs barking on the cats meowing or the cars and the trucks and the trains hooting their horns going through their Carson City town. No, they just sit there staring at the radio, waiting to hear the announcement about whether you's dead or alive. They don't even pay attention to the food on their stoves and the kitchens for dinner. I know all about them. I ain't as dumb as some people think just because I don't talk much and because I'm a shoemaker and a pumpkin farmer and I grow walnuts and I make puppets and I didn't get myself to any high school. I know all about them people out there. I went over to that big city. Well, not that big city. I went over to Indianapolis and I went inside the library and I read books about people out there in the West. I even know what they eat every night out there. I know they don't even care about their pots of Irish stew or their Italian plates of spaghetti or their bowls of German sauerkraut on their kitchen stoves. No, they just want to know if you's dead. All the people sitting there in their living rooms, they don't know nothing about me. They don't know nothing about Granny. They don't know nothing about you. They don't know nothing about this godforsaken town. Some of those people are listening to the radio instead of eating their suppers. But then at least you got that nice Reno Mrs. White lady. I remember what she wrote in one of those letters of hers. I remember that letter because it was so nice. And I took it to Granny and told her to stop wailing and howling and sobbing like she was little Bo Peep looking for a little lost lamb. That nice lady, Mrs. White, says some of the people out there are wanting my grandson to die only because they ain't nothing more than revengeful spectators. And some are recreational mourners, and some nothing more than unfulfilled curiosity seekers. I remember those words because I read that letter so many times. Revengeful spectators, recreational mourners, and unfulfilled curiosity seekers. I never forget those words long as I live. Well, that's all I got to be saying sitting here in this old dark shed. Now, I'm going to open this telegram from that nice prison warden. And if it says you was going to stay alive and stay in prison, then I'm going to go inside the house and tell your Granny and then get me some sleep and go tomorrow morning with the money box and buy me a ticket to come see you out there. But if it says, if it's telling us that yous is already dead and done, well, then maybe I just might stay here a little bit longer in this dark shed and do some more remembering about how I used to laugh when I was teaching yous the puppet maker's dance.
He shot and killed a man out in Nevada. He thought of home if given another chance to show himself and to all the others that a boy could prove himself a man. His grandma back in Stockwell, Indiana. His daddy had always been dirt poor. Did he hate himself or did he hate the world gone cold? And if he had another chance, he'd stayed in school. She said, Floyd, Floyd, there are no trains here, boy. Come and take my hand, don't be afraid. She whispered, Floyd, little boy, I can hear her say, Mommy's here, now don't you be afraid. Some say he was wrong, some say he didn't care. And others said he deserved to die. He thanked the Lord for sending all the prayers, and with a teardrop he promised not to cry. That poor boy had no sense of a future. Is there justice on the other side? And as his bare feet took him closer to his destiny, the people just stood there and cried. And she said, Floyd, Floyd, there are no trains here, boy. Come and take my hand, don't be afraid. She whispered, Floyd, little boy. I can hear her say, Mommy's here, now don't you be afraid. To Floyd, his anger, his sadness were the same. He only knew to show it differently. His grandma said, remember his name. Here's to Floyd Loveless, there's still some good in me. Some good in me, if I had another chance to be free and make something of my life. And now the good Lord has forgiven me. I'm not in 23, there's still some good in me. If only you could see, there's some good in me still.
There Is Still Something Good in Me is a musical theatrical podcast that I created based on the true story of a 17-year-old boy with a multitude of disabilities named Floyd Loveless, who was executed in September 1944 in the Nevada gas chamber. I wrote this production and have performed it across the country because of my two concerns. One, that today there are over 48,000 teenagers between the ages of 13 to 18 incarcerated in juvenile detention centers, county jails, and federal and state prisons, with over 2,000 who have been given life sentences. And second, where are the support services, the grief counseling programs for these incarcerated kids, grandmas and grandpas who feel so deprived of hope, feel helpless and in severe grief about the grandchildren they love? I want to thank two people for this production. I want to thank my friend Jim Eaglesmith, who composed and performed the songs you heard. And I want to thank my friend who wrote a book about Floyd, and if you would like to get it, it's called The Boy Nevada Killed, Floyd Loveless and the Juvenile Capital Punishment Debate. Her name is Janice Oberding, O-B-E-R-D-I-N-G, Janice Oberding. If you'd like to contact me for performances or workshops, you can reach me at joeygalata@gmail.com, joeygalata@gmail.com. This is Joseph Galata, and I am honored to have honored Floyd.
His grandpa couldn't save him from the jailhouse. The warden sent a letter to his home. He felt helpless and hopeless in that prison yard. And why his mommy left this world he didn't know. Grandpa said, "Floyd, little boy, now you're on your own. Help yourself and do the best you can." Floyd said, "Why?" to himself, "I don't understand. I hope for time to prove myself a man."